Las Vegas, 1970. The lights of the International Hotel cut through the warm desert night like enormous stars. Inside, thousands of people waited for Elvis Presley. They had come dressed in their finest clothes. Women held cameras against their chests. Men leaned forward in their seats, already whispering about what songs Elvis might sing that evening. Behind the curtain, the atmosphere was completely different. Crew members rushed from one side of the backstage area to another. Musicians tuned their instruments. Stagehands checked microphones and cables. Security guards stood near the entrances. And in the middle of all that noise stood Elvis, 35 years old, famous beyond imagination, yet strangely quiet. He wore a black leather outfit that caught the backstage lights whenever he moved. His hair was perfectly styled, and the familiar confidence was there in his face. But that evening, something felt different. He couldn't explain it. He had performed thousands of times. He had heard thousands of voices. But something in the air made him uneasy. Elvis stepped away from the musicians and walked toward the backstage hallway. Then he heard it. A voice. Soft. Almost fragile. At first, he thought someone was rehearsing a ballad. He stopped. The voice continued. There was something unusual about it. It wasn't technically perfect in the way professional singers were trained to be perfect. It was something else. The girl singing wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing for applause. She was simply following the music. Every note seemed to exist in its own little world. Elvis slowly moved closer. A stagehand noticed him. "Mr. Presley." Elvis raised one finger. The stagehand immediately stopped talking. The voice became clearer. And then Elvis recognized the melody. Samba Pa Ti. His expression changed. That melody had a sadness that was difficult to explain. It didn't demand attention. It pulled attention toward itself. The young girl standing near a small rehearsal microphone had long brown hair and wore a simple pink dress. She looked to be around 16. Her hands were tightly folded against her chest. The room around her seemed overwhelming. Bright lights, people walking, equipment buzzing, voices coming from different directions. She kept looking down, but when the music began, everything else seemed to disappear. She sang, and Elvis stared. There were moments when she closed her eyes and tilted her head slightly, as though she wasn't listening to the music, as though she was seeing it. When she reached the most emotional passage, her voice became almost painfully beautiful. Elvis didn't move. The musicians nearby had stopped what they were doing. Nobody wanted to interrupt her. The final note faded. Silence. The girl opened her eyes. She suddenly realized there were people watching. Her breathing changed. She looked frightened. Elvis noticed immediately. He didn't clap. He didn't rush toward her. He simply smiled. A gentle smile. Then he slowly brought his hands together. One clap. Then another. The girl looked at him. Elvis nodded. That was beautiful. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the floor. A woman standing nearby stepped forward. She's sorry, she doesn't always. Elvis gently shook his head. Don't apologize. The woman stopped. Elvis looked at the girl again. What's your name? The girl hesitated. Anna. Anna, Elvis repeated. She nodded. He smiled. That's a beautiful name. Anna still said nothing. Then she whispered something so quietly that Elvis almost didn't hear it. I don't like the lights. Elvis looked toward the bright rehearsal lamps. He immediately understood. Turn them down. One of the technicians looked confused. So, turn them down. The lights became softer. Anna's shoulders relaxed. Elvis watched carefully. He didn't know exactly what she experienced, but he understood one thing. She didn't need to be forced into his world. If he wanted to understand hers, he had to slow down. Then Elvis noticed something strange. On the music stand in front of Anna was a small notebook. The pages were covered with handwritten musical notes. Elvis walked closer. Did you write those? Anna nodded. He looked at the page. There were melodies written across several lines. Some were recognizable. Others weren't. Elvis pointed to one. What is that? My father's. The room suddenly felt quieter. Elvis looked at her. Your father's. Anna nodded. He used to play it. When? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, before he died. Elvis's expression softened. I'm sorry. Anna looked at him for the first time. He said you knew it. Elvis froze. The words seemed to hit him harder than any scream from a stadium crowd. Me? Anna nodded. My father said Elvis would remember. Elvis stared at the notebook. Something cold moved through him. He had no idea who this girl's father was, or what melody she was talking about. But somewhere deep inside his memory, something had begun to stir. A sound, a room, a guitar, a young man's voice. Memories from before the fame, before the jumpsuits, before Las Vegas, before millions of people knew his name. Elvis swallowed. What's your father's name? Anna looked down at the notebook. Then she answered, Daniel. Elvis's face changed. He knew that name. Not recently. Not from the newspapers. Not from Hollywood. From another life. A life almost nobody remembered. A life when Elvis Presley was just a young man with a guitar, a dream, and barely enough money to pay for a meal. Daniel. Elvis took one step backward. He suddenly remembered a tiny room in Memphis. A battered guitar. A rainy afternoon. And a melody he had heard once, decades ago. A melody that had never completely left his mind. He whispered, Where did your father learn that? Anna slowly opened the notebook. Inside was a folded photograph. She handed it to him. Elvis took it. His fingers stopped moving. Because the photograph showed a much younger man standing beside a very young Elvis Presley. And suddenly, Elvis understood. This wasn't just a talented girl who happened to know an old melody. Someone had brought her here for a reason. But who? And why? Elvis looked toward Anna. Did your father tell you anything else? Anna shook her head. Then she said something that made the hairs rise on Elvis's arms. He told me that one day you would hear me sing it. Elvis stared at her. One day. Anna nodded. He said you would know what it meant. The room fell silent. For the first time that evening, Elvis didn't feel like the most famous man in the building. He felt like a young man again. A young man standing at the beginning of a road he had forgotten. And somewhere behind the walls of the International Hotel, thousands of people were waiting for him to walk onto the stage. But Elvis couldn't move. Not yet. Because there was one question he desperately needed answered. Who was Daniel? And what had he left behind? Quick question for everyone watching. if you were standing backstage and heard Anna sing that melody, would you immediately believe Elvis's reaction, or would you think there had to be another explanation? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how many different cities and countries are listening to Anna's mysterious song tonight. Because what Elvis was about to discover would take him much deeper into his forgotten past. Elvis folded the photograph carefully. Anna. She looked at him. Can you sing that melody again? She hesitated. The whole thing. The whole thing. Anna looked toward her mother. Her mother nodded. Anna placed her hands on the microphone. The room became quiet. And then she began. The first notes were soft. Elvis closed his eyes. There it was. The same melody. The same strange, emotional movement. But then something happened. Anna changed one note. Just one. Elvis's eyes opened immediately. Stop. Anna stopped. Everyone looked at him. Elvis walked toward her. That note. Anna looked confused. The one you just changed. She pointed toward her notebook. My father said it was wrong. Elvis stared at the page. Wrong. She nodded. He said everyone played it wrong. Elvis slowly sat down. His mind was racing. Because he remembered something. Many years earlier, Daniel had once played a melody for him. Elvis had laughed and told him the melody needed to be changed. Daniel had disagreed. He had said, "One day you'll understand why that note matters." Elvis had forgotten the conversation. Or perhaps he had buried it. Now, decades later, a 16-year-old girl was standing in front of him, singing that exact melody. And correcting the exact note Elvis had once changed. Elvis looked at Anna. Your father was right. Anna smiled. It was the first real smile she had given him. And for some reason, that tiny smile affected Elvis more than the screaming crowds ever could. He looked down at the photograph again. The young man beside him stared back from another lifetime. Elvis whispered, I haven't thought about him in years. Anna asked, did you love his music? Elvis smiled sadly. I loved his heart. Then Anna asked, why did he disappear? Elvis had no answer. And that frightened him. Because he suddenly realized that his memory of Daniel wasn't complete. There were missing pieces. Important pieces. Pieces he had never questioned. Elvis stood up. Where is your mother? She's outside. Bring her in. A few moments later, Anna's mother entered the room. She looked nervous. Elvis studied her face. You knew I would remember him. She nodded. He told me you would. When did he die? 3 years ago. Elvis lowered his head. I'm sorry. He wanted you to hear his music. Why didn't he contact me? The woman looked away. Because he didn't think you would remember. Those words hurt. Elvis stared at the floor. Then he asked, what happened to him? She took a deep breath. He spent his entire life believing that one melody would eventually find its way back to you. Elvis looked at Anna. The girl was holding the notebook against her chest. And suddenly, the upcoming concert didn't matter anymore. Not the lights. Not the applause. Not the cameras. Not the thousands of people waiting outside. There was an unfinished story sitting in front of him. And Elvis knew he couldn't walk onto that stage until he understood it. He turned toward his manager. Push the opening back. The manager stared at him. But the audience, I said push it back. Elvis looked at Anna, then at the notebook, then at the old photograph. His voice became quiet. Tonight, I'm not looking for a song. He paused. I'm looking for a memory. And somewhere in the distance, the audience began chanting his name. Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. But Elvis didn't hear them. He was listening to the melody again. The melody of a man who had disappeared from his life decades ago. The melody that had returned through the voice of a girl who had never even met him before that night. And Elvis still didn't know the most important secret. Daniel hadn't simply left a song behind. He had left Elvis a message. And that message was hidden inside the final notes of the melody. The audience outside was growing restless. Thousands of people had come to the International Hotel that night expecting Elvis Presley. They had dressed for the occasion. They had waited in line. They had paid for their tickets. And now, behind the curtain, the man they had come to see was sitting in a quiet backstage room with a 16-year-old girl, an old photograph, and a melody that had somehow traveled across more than a decade. Elvis stared at the photograph again. The young man standing beside him looked almost like a stranger. But Elvis knew him. Daniel. He remembered the face. He remembered the guitar. He remembered the arguments. He remembered the music. But he couldn't remember why Daniel had disappeared. That bothered him more than anything. Elvis slowly turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. Only 6 words. The answer is in the last note. Elvis's breathing stopped for a moment. He looked at Anna. Did you write this? She shook her head. My father did. When? Before he died. Elvis looked back at the photograph. The last note. He suddenly remembered Daniel's voice. A young Daniel sitting across from him in a tiny Memphis room. You always rush the ending. Elvis had laughed. What are you talking about? The last note. It's just a song. Daniel had looked at him seriously. No, it isn't. Elvis had forgotten that conversation for years. Until now. He stood. Anna, play it again. Her mother looked concerned. She has already been through a lot tonight. Elvis nodded. I know. He looked at Anna. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Anna studied him. Then she nodded. She walked toward the piano. Everyone became silent. Her fingers touched the keys. The melody began. Slow, delicate, almost haunting. Elvis listened carefully. He wasn't listening like a singer anymore. He was listening like a young musician trying to solve a mystery. The melody moved forward. One phrase, then another. Anna reached the final section. Elvis leaned forward. The last note came. And then, silence. Elvis closed his eyes. Nothing. He opened them. That's it. Anna nodded. That's how my father taught me. Elvis shook his head. No. He stood. There's another note. Anna looked confused. What? The ending. There isn't another note. Elvis walked toward the piano. Your father always believed there was. Anna looked down. He said you would know. Elvis put his hands on the piano. He played the final chord. Then another. Then a third. He stopped. His face went pale. Because suddenly he heard something in his head. Not music. A voice. Daniel's voice. If you ever finish this melody, you'll understand why I had to leave. Elvis stepped away from the piano. Anna's mother noticed his expression. What is it? Elvis didn't answer. He walked toward the hallway. His manager followed. Elvis, we need to make a decision. The audience has been waiting. Elvis stopped. How long? Nearly 20 minutes. Elvis looked toward the stage. He could hear the crowd. People were shouting his name. He could have walked out there. He could have smiled. He could have started singing. Everything would have returned to normal. But something inside him refused. Get me a phone. Elvis. No. A phone was brought to him. He dialed a number he hadn't called in years. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, an elderly voice answered. Hello. Elvis swallowed. Sam. Silence. The voice on the other end suddenly became tense. Who is this? It's Elvis. Another silence. Then, Elvis Presley. Yes. Sam breathed heavily. I haven't heard from you in years. I need to ask you something. About what? Daniel. The line went completely quiet. Elvis knew immediately. Sam knew something. You remember him. I remember everything. Then tell me what happened. Sam didn't answer. Sam. Finally, the old man spoke. You really don't remember. Elvis frowned. Remember what? The night he left. Elvis closed his eyes. There it was again. A locked door in his memory. He could almost see it. Rain. A car. Daniel carrying a guitar case. Someone shouting. Then nothing. Where did he go? Sam's voice became quieter. He went looking for you. Elvis opened his eyes. What? He believed someone had stolen his music. Elvis's face hardened. Who? I don't know. You do know. Elvis, it was a long time ago. Who? Sam sighed. Then he said a name. Elvis froze. The name belonged to a music publisher from the early days of his career. A man Elvis remembered only vaguely. A man who had tried to control several young musicians. A man who had once offered Daniel money for his compositions. Elvis remembered something else. Daniel had refused. And then Daniel disappeared. Elvis slowly turned toward Anna. She was still sitting beside the piano. Her mother was holding her hand. The girl seemed unaware of the conversation. Elvis returned to the phone. Sam, what was stolen? The melody. Elvis's voice became almost a whisper. What melody? The one you're listening to tonight. Elvis stared at Anna. That's impossible. No. Sam's voice trembled. It was written before you ever heard it. Elvis's heart began beating faster. Then why do I remember playing it? Sam didn't answer. Elvis asked again. Why do I remember playing it? Finally, Sam said, because Daniel gave it to you. The room seemed to tilt. Elvis sat down. He remembered. Not everything, but enough. Daniel had once handed him several sheets of music. Elvis had played the melody. He had loved it. But Daniel had told him, don't let anyone hear this yet. Elvis had asked why. Daniel had said, because it isn't finished. And then somehow the pages disappeared. Elvis had assumed Daniel took them. But now he understood. Daniel hadn't taken them. Someone else had. And Elvis had spent years believing he had simply forgotten the song. Sam's voice pulled him back. Elvis, I'm here. There is something else. What? Daniel wasn't the only person who knew the melody. Elvis looked toward Anna. Who else? Sam hesitated. Your mother. Elvis turned sharply. Anna's mother looked at him. She knew. Elvis slowly walked toward her. You knew this melody. The woman nodded. I knew the story. Why didn't you tell me? Because Daniel didn't want you to know until the right time. What right time? She looked at Anna. When she was ready. Elvis stared at the girl. What does that mean? The mother sat beside her daughter. Anna has remembered the melody since she was very young. Elvis frowned. She was taught it. Yes. By Daniel. Not exactly. Elvis waited. Her mother continued. He played it once when she was 5. Anna looked up. He played it every night. Elvis's expression softened. And she remembered. Every note. Her mother smiled sadly. She could hear it once and reproduce it. Elvis looked toward the notebook. So that's why she sings it differently. Her mother nodded. Daniel believed she understood something he never could. What? She looked at him. Emotion. Elvis said nothing. Daniel told me that Anna didn't hear music the way most people do. She noticed patterns, spaces, tiny changes, things other people ignored. Elvis looked at Anna. The girl was tracing a line in her notebook. Then she spoke. My father said music tells the truth. Elvis smiled. He was right. Anna looked at him. Are you angry with him? Elvis was surprised. Why would I be? Because he left. Elvis's face softened. No. He paused. I'm angry that I forgot. Anna looked down. You didn't forget. Elvis looked at her. She continued. You were just waiting. Those words struck him deeply. For a moment, Elvis couldn't speak. Outside, the crowd erupted again. Elvis. The sound shook the walls. His manager appeared at the doorway. We really need you. Elvis looked at the clock. Nearly half an hour had passed. He finally nodded. I'm going on. The manager looked relieved. Good. But Elvis raised a hand. Not alone. Everyone stared at him. He looked toward Anna. She comes with me. Her mother immediately stood. No. Elvis didn't argue. He understood. You're right. He looked at Anna. I'm sorry. Anna nodded. Then she said, I don't like crowds. I know. I don't like bright lights. I know. I don't like people staring. Elvis smiled. Neither do I. Anna looked surprised. Then she smiled. Elvis turned to the stage manager. Lower the lights. But the show. Lower them. He looked at his musicians. And bring out the acoustic guitar. The manager stared at him. What are you planning? Elvis smiled faintly. I don't know yet. He walked toward the stage. The curtain opened. The roar was enormous. Thousands of voices became one sound. Elvis. Elvis stepped into the light. The crowd exploded. For a moment, the old magic returned. He smiled. He waved. He lifted the microphone. But instead of starting with the planned opening number, he looked toward the musicians. "Tonight," he said, "I'd like to do something a little different." The crowd became quieter. Elvis continued. "Sometimes a song finds you when you're not looking for it." The audience listened. "And sometimes," he paused, "a song remembers you." A strange silence filled the room. Elvis picked up the acoustic guitar. He played the first few notes. The audience didn't recognize the melody. But Elvis did. It was Daniel's melody. The melody that had followed him across decades. Then, from backstage, Anna heard it. She looked at her mother. Her eyes widened. "He's playing it." Her mother nodded. Anna stood. She walked toward the edge of the stage. The lights were low. The audience couldn't see her clearly. Elvis looked over. He saw her, and he stopped playing. The entire audience became confused. Elvis smiled at Anna. Then he said something no one expected. "Come here." Anna froze. Thousands of people were watching. She shook her head. Elvis nodded. "That's okay." He didn't pressure her. Instead, he turned toward the audience. "Sometimes you have to give people time." The audience remained silent. Then Elvis looked back at Anna. And slowly, she stepped forward. One step, then another. The crowd watched. When she reached the microphone, Elvis moved away from it. He gave her the space. Anna looked at the audience. Her breathing became faster. The lights were lowered even more. Elvis whispered, "Just sing for yourself." Anna closed her eyes. Then she began. The first note was almost a whisper. The audience went completely silent. Then the melody grew. Beautiful, uncertain, emotional. Elvis played behind her. The two sounds became one. For the first time that night, Elvis wasn't the star. He was simply a musician accompanying another musician. And the audience felt it. When Anna reached the final note, she changed it. The same mysterious final note from her father's melody. Elvis looked up. And this time, he understood. The final note wasn't just music. It was a signal, a musical signature. Daniel had hidden a message inside it. Elvis stopped playing. Anna opened her eyes. She looked at him. "Did you hear it?" Elvis nodded slowly. "Yes." "What did it say?" Elvis stared at her. Then he whispered, "Your father wasn't running away." Anna's face changed. He was hiding. The audience didn't understand. But Elvis did. Daniel hadn't disappeared because he wanted to leave. He had disappeared because someone was trying to take the melody from him. And if that was true, there was one question left. Who had been searching for that melody all these years? Before we continue, tell me this. Do you think Daniel was hiding from someone, or do you think Elvis's memory is still missing an important piece? Comment your theory below. And if this story has you hooked, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city and country. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Because Elvis had just discovered something terrifying. Someone had known about this melody for decades, and they might still be looking for it. That night, Elvis didn't finish the concert the way anyone expected. He finished it with one final promise. He looked at Anna and said, "We are going to find out what happened to your father." Anna nodded. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the stage, a man was watching. He had been watching Anna all evening. And when he saw Elvis take the melody seriously, he quietly walked away. He pulled an old photograph from his pocket. On it were three young men, Elvis, Daniel, and a third man, the man watching from the shadows. On the back of the photograph were four words: he must never remember. The concert ended differently that night. Instead of leaving through the main entrance, Elvis stayed backstage with Anna and her mother. The old photograph lay on the table between them. Three young men stood in it: Elvis, Daniel, and the stranger. Elvis picked up the photograph again. "I know this man." Anna's mother looked at him. "Do you remember his name?" Elvis stared at the face. "No." He turned the photograph over. "Nothing." Then he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A tiny mark had been scratched into the bottom corner. 3 letters. RMS. Elvis frowned. "What's that?" Anna's mother shook her head. Daniel never explained it. Elvis walked toward the window. Outside, Las Vegas was glowing beneath the desert sky. But his mind was somewhere else. Memphis. 1950s. A small room. Daniel sitting across from him. A guitar between them. And that third man standing in the doorway. Elvis suddenly remembered the man's voice. "You don't know what you're carrying." Elvis turned sharply. "I remember." Anna looked up. "What?" "I remember him." His voice was barely above a whisper. "He came to Daniel's room." "Why?" Elvis closed his eyes. "Because he wanted the melody." Anna's mother looked frightened. "What happened?" Elvis's memory came in fragments. Daniel refusing to give up the music. The stranger becoming angry. A heated argument. Then Daniel handing Elvis several pages. "Keep these safe." Elvis had forgotten the rest. Until now. He remembered hiding the pages inside his guitar case. But the next morning, they were gone. Elvis opened his eyes. "Someone stole the music from me." Anna looked at him. "Was it him?" Elvis nodded slowly. "I think so." Suddenly, there was a knock on the backstage door. Everyone froze. A security guard opened it slightly. "Mr. Presley." "Yes." "There's a man asking for you." "Who?" The guard hesitated. He wouldn't give a name. Elvis walked toward the door. "Where is he?" "Outside." Elvis looked at Anna. "Stay here." He stepped into the hallway. At the far end stood an elderly man wearing a dark coat. Elvis recognized him immediately. The same face from the photograph. The stranger. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then the old man said, "You finally remembered." Elvis's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" The man smiled sadly. "Someone who tried to protect you." "From what?" "From the truth." Elvis stepped closer. "You destroyed Daniel's life." The man's expression changed. "No." He looked toward the room where Anna was waiting. "Daniel destroyed his own life." Elvis became angry. "Don't you dare." The old man reached into his coat. Elvis immediately tensed. But instead of a weapon, the man pulled out a small cassette tape. He handed it to Elvis. "Daniel recorded this before he disappeared." Elvis stared at the tape. "Why bring it now?" "Because he knew you would eventually mate his daughter." Elvis looked at the old man. "How did you know?" The man smiled. "Because Daniel knew her better than anyone." Then he walked away. Elvis stood there holding the tape. He returned to the room. Anna looked at it. That's my father's. Elvis nodded. They found an old cassette player. The tape clicked. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice appeared. Daniel. Older. Tired. But unmistakable. Elvis, if you're hearing this, then Anna has found you. Elvis closed his eyes. Daniel continued. I need you to understand something. The melody was never meant to become famous. It was never meant to make me rich. A pause. It was meant to remember someone. Elvis opened his eyes. Daniel's voice continued. There was a night when 3 of us made a promise. You, me, and the man whose name you no longer remember. The tape crackled. We promised that if one of us ever disappeared, the others would protect the music. Anna whispered. Why? The tape continued. Because the melody contains something more important than music. Elvis leaned closer. It contains the location of something we were never supposed to find. The tape suddenly became distorted. Then Daniel said one final sentence. Elvis, don't trust the man who gives you the answer. The tape stopped. Silence. Elvis looked at Anna. She looked terrified. Where is he? Who? The man from the photograph. Elvis turned toward the door. But the hallway was empty. The stranger was gone. Then Anna noticed something on the table. The old photograph was no longer there. Someone had taken it. Elvis rushed outside. Nothing. Only the noise of Las Vegas. Cars. Music. People. Lights. Then he noticed something on the ground. A folded piece of paper. He picked it up. There was a single sentence written on it. If you want the truth about Daniel, go to Memphis. Elvis stared at the words. Anna stepped beside him. Are we going? Elvis looked at her. For the first time that night, he smiled. Yes. But neither of them noticed the dark car parked across the street. Inside, the same stranger watched them. He picked up a telephone. He remembered. A voice answered. Then we have a problem. The stranger looked toward Elvis. No. He smiled. We have a deadline. What do you think is hidden inside Daniel's melody? Is it really a secret location, or is there something much more personal behind the song? Tell me your theory in the comments. And if you're enjoying this mystery, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know whether you're listening from the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, India, or somewhere else. Because Elvis was about to return to Memphis. And waiting for him, there was a secret that had survived for nearly 20 years. A secret Daniel had trusted only one person to protect. His daughter. Memphis looked different from the way Elvis remembered it. The streets were quieter. The buildings seemed smaller. But the memories were still there. Elvis stood outside an old music shop with Anna beside him. This is where your father used to come, he said. Anna looked through the dusty window. Are you sure? Elvis nodded. I remember him here. Inside, they found an elderly shopkeeper who recognized the photograph immediately. Daniel, he whispered. Elvis placed the photograph on the counter. And him. The old man became silent. That man was looking for Daniel for years. Why? The shopkeeper looked toward Anna. Because Daniel discovered something. What? He reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old envelope. Your father left this here. Elvis opened it. Inside was one sheet of music. The melody. But beneath The final note was a sentence. The treasure was never hidden, the memory was. Elvis stared at it. Then he understood. The melody wasn't a map. It wasn't a code leading to money or some mysterious treasure. It was a musical record of a moment from their youth. Daniel had written it after the three friends promised to never abandon one another. But when success came, their friendship broke apart. The third man had stolen the pages because he believed the melody could make him famous. Daniel spent the rest of his life trying to recover it. Elvis looked at Anna. Your father didn't want fame. What did he want? Elvis smiled sadly. He wanted someone to remember. Anna looked at the music. Remember what? Elvis answered. That before I became Elvis Presley, I was just a young man with friends who believed in me. Anna smiled. Then she asked, will you finish the song? Elvis looked at the final unfinished note. Yes. They returned to the hotel. That evening, Elvis sat with a guitar while Anna stood beside the piano. Together, they finished Daniel's melody. When the final note was played, Elvis didn't speak. Neither did Anna. They simply listened to the silence afterward. The next night, Elvis performed the melody privately for Anna and her mother. No cameras. No reporters. No publicity. Just music. When it ended, Anna hugged her mother. Elvis watched them quietly. He realized something. The greatest gift Daniel had left behind wasn't the melody. It was his daughter, a girl who had preserved a forgotten piece of music when the rest of the world had forgotten it. Before Anna left, Elvis gave her the original photograph. Keep this. She looked at him. Why? Because your father wanted the memory to survive. Anna held it carefully. Then she smiled. Will you remember him now? Elvis looked toward the empty stage. Forever. Years later, Elvis would still remember that night. Not because thousands of people had applauded. Not because he had performed in one of the greatest hotels in Las Vegas. But because a quiet young girl had walked into his life, carrying a melody from his forgotten past. A melody that reminded him who he had been before the fame. Before the lights. Before the crowds. Before the world knew his name. And whenever Elvis played those final notes, he remembered Daniel and Anna and the promise that had survived nearly 20 years. Some songs are written to be heard. Others are written to be remembered. And sometimes a song finds its way back to the person who was always meant to hear it. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. What would you do if a forgotten song suddenly brought back someone from your past? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. And remember, some memories don't disappear. They simply wait for the right voice to bring them home. This story is fictional and dramatized for entertainment. It is not a verified historical account of Elvis Presley.